You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Nathan, as I do with all my guests that I've interviewed on the podcast, I like to take them back to when they first got into cricket, and it's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they started to get into cricket. So Nathan, let's go back to the very beginning. Yep. Growing up, I know that's a long time ago when you look at it in the context of life. Yep. What were your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket? And who were some of your cricketing idols growing up?
Yeah, look, I grew up probably like every young kid playing cricket in the backyard. My grandfather on my mother's side pretty much got me into cricket. They had a big farm out of at a place called Mount McEwen in Wondai in Queensland. And when we lived in Kingaroy, we used to go out there every second weekend and play cricket. And on my father's side, cricket was in the Hauritz blood. So, I had great uncles that played. I had, I've got cricket balls back from like the 1930s and stuff. And, so I was around the game very early. And I grew up, when we moved to Hervey Bay, about the age of 6, 7, started playing cricket. My earliest memories are, watching the Australians play, moving the dining table out into the living room, watching them. I used to make sinkers for my dad. My dad had a sinker business, and some of my greatest memories are listening to ABC Grandstand while making sinkers, dying from lead poisoning. But, doing that in the backyard. It was just, look, it's one of those things as a young kid you just grow up with, and I lived and breathed it 24 hours a day.
Yeah, definitely. And then I suppose I can relate to that as well, and you're just wanting to play cricket all the time. I was constantly in the backyard nonstop until dark, till the mosquitoes bit me, and then I came back inside but I just love cricket. And I think that resonates with so many. And I suppose that's just how you spark your passion and enthusiasm for cricket, and for you, very fond memories. Obviously, playing for a club and club cricket there. What was that experience like, when you were old enough to play for a club? Take us through that experience.
Yeah, it's quite ironic, actually. I was just speaking to my dad today about it. Back when I was growing up, they had, in Hervey Bay especially, not many cricketers. So I played under 10s and then under 12s. I think under 16s, we had 3 teams. So the clubs, and then once you played first grade, there was, senior cricketers, and I played for a club called Cavaliers in club cricket back then. When I was under 10s, it was like Border or Taylor or Hayden or someone like that. And then, I played for Cavaliers, and Beth Mooney also played for Cavaliers from Hervey Bay. So, look, that was probably my first main club that I ever played for in that region. Then moving to Brisbane, I was lucky enough to go to Nudgee College, and I played for Northern Suburbs. I had a few mates from Nudgee who recommended to go to Norths, and stayed at Norths. And then when I moved down to Sydney to play cricket at Sydney, I played for Randwick Petersham. I got introduced to them through Mike Whitney and Simon Kadich and Usman Khawaja and Matty Mott, these guys. And I was pretty well looked after the clubs that I played at. I can't really complain. Starting at Cavaliers and Hervey Bay, they're still going. I still have a lot to do with Hervey Bay cricket. I'm going back there next weekend for the presentation, and all the way through to playing for Randwick Petersham and coaching North as well as a little bit before I went to Ireland a few years ago.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to hear that you're still involved with all those clubs in some sort of capacity. And I suppose that's the thing when you play for a club, growing up, and you create memories and friendships that last forever. And I'm sure that's the case with you to this day, that that's where it all starts, really, for everyone that wants to play the game of cricket, really.
Well, look, it's pretty much, because you spend most of your time there. You're spending Saturdays and Sundays and training twice a week, and they pretty much see at your worst. You don't have many other disappointing moments than not winning a game or getting whacked or getting a duck first ball. It's a pretty tough moment at times, and you got your mates around you, and you spend some quality moments, and still friends with a lot of people that have played cricket with at Randwick Petersham, and speak to them. And look, I'm not in Sydney anymore, so I don't see them as much as what I used to, but still, it's still such a great feeling. And Cavaliers Club, that's where I grew up, Hervey Bay. My dad still goes out and paints fences and makes food for the canteen, and still heavily involved. It's just a way of life, and that's just club cricket. That's what it's best for.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you were, because we're going to talk about it a bit later on, when you played for Australia eventually, and then obviously domestic cricket with Queensland and New South Wales. But did everyone feel a bit, 10 feet taller when an international player came back to the club and played in the weekend?
Oh, look, I played, I think, just a couple games for Cavaliers, after I'd played at top level. Look, I guess when you're playing at club level, there's also other state players. When I played at Norse, our team was just stacked. We had Mitch Johnson, Chris Hartley, Clinton Perrin, James Hopes, Jimmy Marr, Brendan Nash. We had a multitude of players playing in that side. Renwick Petersham, I said a few of them already. We had Kadich, Mott, Sean Flegler, Usman Khawaja, Bert Cockley, who played. And then you had other players moving on. David Warner now plays there. Scott Coit played there. So didn't really phase anybody who played. It was just, just a great time to play with your mates, really. A little bit less pressure at times. I think the only times it got tough is probably when you weren't at the top of your game at domestic level. And that's probably when, as a player, as a grade player, you probably weren't the best teammate. I definitely can say that I wasn't the best teammate. I was so focused on my own performance and what I did in life, and just wanted to go back and score runs or take wickets instead of actually enjoying the moment. And I try and encourage a lot of people these days, young cricketers, that you don't have these moments for a long time, and the anguish, the anger passes. Just make an effort to be a better team man, and you'd be surprised at what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cricket's a great life teacher, really. It teaches many life lessons.
Yep.
And you can learn so much from the game.
Yep.
So progressing through the ranks, when did the realization come for you that, I'm rising through the ranks, I'm getting noticed, I'm getting selected in representative teams? When did it dawn on you that, this could be something bigger that could lead on to playing domestic cricket and then eventually for Australia? When did that realization come for you to know, okay, it's time to knuckle down, time to work? If I'm going to make a fist of this, I really got to knuckle down and, really take this opportunity. When did that come for you, Nathan?
Look, I think probably you start to feel that because I went to the academy down in Adelaide. Went down there. So Watto went, Michael Clark, Mitch, Chris Hartley, Andrew McDonald, Vogues, all these guys in our year. And I think when you go there, then you start to think that you're on the right path. If you can do everything within your power, train hard, do everything right. Look, we're still teenagers. We're still going to make mistakes, but working really hard in that environment showed you what is the potential. And I think for me, that was the first time I'm like, okay, look, I'm 17 now. I'm making Australian teams, touring, but at the academy was like, that was the pinnacle. And then it's just up to you. You're playing grade cricket from then. Whereas these days, I think my kids are playing a lot of grade cricket so early, and whether they're better or worse or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But they're probably exposed to a very different setup than what we were when we were growing up. And I think as a 15, 16-year-old, you probably not they expect it, but you think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. Yeah,
no, definitely. And for you, it did. You got noticed, and then you got selected pretty young, I suppose, when you made your debut for Queensland in the early 2000s. And then, what was that experience like, knowing that, okay, I've done all the work and then I get selected to play for Queensland? Talk us through that moment when you realised, I've become a first-class cricketer or, domestic cricketer.
Yeah, look, it was a very surreal feeling, buddy. It was. I was actually over in Bangladesh with the Australian Cricket Academy. Wayne Phillips was coach, and I was captaining a side over there. There was a couple of good mates over there with me, and we just played. I think we were just about to play a game against the Bangladesh team, and Wayne Phillips pulled me aside and just was like, "Mate, look, I've got some news for you," and it sounded like it was going to be bad. But he said, mate, just letting you know you've been selected to play for Queensland. So, look, for me, that was probably the start where I'm like, look, that's incredible. Flew back. The experience was Like, it was just like a whirlwind. I literally, like, we played on the Friday, and then like flew Tuesday, arrived Tuesday night, trained Wednesday, trained Thursday, played Friday. So, and the rest of that was a blur. It was just so much fun. James Hoax played. We played Victoria at the Gabba and lost, unfortunately, but it was amazing.
So it must have been quite surreal entering that Queensland side at a young age, obviously in the early 2000s, because you still had players who were playing for Australia, playing for Queensland, like Hayden and Casper Rich and many others as well. Even Andrew Simons, the late Andrew Simons. It was
an incredible side to be part of. Those guys, they my first game, having Bickle and, all these guys who I looked up to. Played a little bit of grade cricket against some of them, and, Bick, Stewie Law, Martin Love, Wade Seckham, Jimmy Marr, Noff, all these guys are there, and it was, look, they make you feel very welcome. I think Queensland too are in a tiny little bit of a transition at the end of the season, with what they were trying to do in one-day cricket and start to get some fresh blood. I didn't set the world on fire. I did okay. I think I took in 4 or 5 games when I'd taken 3 or 4 wickets, and just, the opportunity to play in that environment was pretty cool. And, those guys were just so nice. And still, I can still see all the blokes all the time, and now, and a lot of them are in coaching roles and whatnot. And it was pretty cool.
Yes, definitely. And obviously you realised that, okay, now I'm playing for Queensland. When did it dawn on you that, potentially I could play for Australia if I'm good enough? And it turns out, we'll talk about it a bit later on when we talk about your ODI career and how that came into play. But obviously when you debuted, a couple of years later, basically, you were playing an ODI in South Africa. So did you realise then that, hope it comes, but I've got to work hard for it? But did you realise that, if I put out some good performances, I'm still pretty raw, young, I can potentially make it to international level?
Oh, look, I think you've just got that dream, don't you, as a young kid, to play for Australia. I didn't really look. I think when I first started, you're pretty naive at the idea of how to be picked. It's that age old. You just take wickets and score runs, and you put your name in front of selectors. I didn't even know really how a side was selected or what it was, or Shane Warne was a one-day spinner, so one-day and test spinner. So for me, it was, I just want to try and enjoy my cricket as much as I can and play the best that I can for Queensland. And when I played one-day cricket, I played a role. Back then, they didn't put 5 out until overs 30 to 50. So for a majority of the games, I would bowl overs 30 to 50. And you're bowling with an older ball at the Gabba. My game is very simple. I didn't spin it a great deal. I just bowled stump to stump, had a nice change of pace, and the boundaries were huge. So it was a lot of fun to bowl on. And I had a few games where I had to bowl in the first, 15 overs, and I, was still put to the test. I remember a really important game against the Vicks down at, I think it was Punt Road, and I got Ian Harvey and Brad Hodge out really early, with only 2. Hodge got out with 5 out, but Ian Harvey with only 2 out. And that's when I did stuff like that. That's when I was like, okay, look, I do believe that I can compete at this level, and I had a really good one-day year. We lost the final that year in a game that we probably shouldn't have against New South Wales. We were only chasing, I think, 210 something, not many, and New South Wales quicks were just amazing. But I took, I think I was one of the top wicket takers. I think it was close to 20 wickets or something like that, and got an opportunity from that. And it was at probably the expense of Andrew Simons, not as an all-rounder, obviously, but he was that second sort of spinning option. And, got the opportunity to play for Australia, and Warnie didn't play the first few games. I think he had a bit of a niggle. Played first 3 one-days against South Africa. Did well in my debut. I was very lucky. I come on at a time when, they weren't doing well, South Africa, so that was good. But I think I never really thought, okay, mapped out my way of, okay, this is what I've got to do to be selected. Look, these are the wickets that I've got to take. Exactly. I've got to, look for a 30-wicket season in first-class cricket back then, or, what have I got to do? I'm just going to do the best that I can for Queensland and stay in that side first. That's the main thing, and go back to grade cricket and go from there. I think when I had played for Australia, that's when things started to go a bit skewy, because you want to get back there and you put too much pressure on yourself.
Yes, definitely. I suppose that's the case with every cricketer that plays for their country, which we'll talk about in more detail as we progress through this chat, Nathan, about your Test career and ODI career and brief T20 career. We've got to get that in there. There's only 3 games, but we've got to talk about that as well. But if you had the chance to speak to your younger self now and say to him, Nathan, this is what you did from a young kid, making his way into international cricket, you would achieve what you have achieved in your career, despite the ups and downs along this wonderful journey. What would you say to that younger self if you had the chance to speak to him today about this cricket journey?
Yeah, look, I've been asked this a few times, and it's very simple. I would have said work harder. I worked hard, but didn't. Look, I think you can always work harder. Look, we grew up in an era of going to the gym in the morning and then maybe doing a net session in the afternoon. Whereas now is going to the gym in the morning, having a bowl at lunch, then having a net in the afternoon. So I've been able to. I was a batter growing up, and I didn't work hard enough from the age of probably 17 to 20. On my batting went backward. I just thought my natural skill would look after me, and it never did. I'd say don't be such a sook. I definitely let things affect me on and off the field, and it made me a tough teammate at times. When things didn't go my way, and I mentor a lot of young kids with my cricket academy and the job I do. And the one thing I always try and do with them in every session is, just to smile and enjoy the moment, because it's so hard. The game is so hard. I work with a lot of young kids who might train 3 or 4 times a week, hit thousands of balls, and then go out and nick the first ball on the weekend. And you got to keep trying to tell them to keep doing it, keep doing the same thing, because you know what? It's going to turn. All the hard work's going to turn. And they've almost got tears in their eyes because they're trying to fight through this stuff. So those 2 things, I'd probably say, look, probably respect my body a bit more, with regard to, longevity, health and wellness, making sure that I'm 100% focused on what I'm trying to do, instead of, the Queensland culture was a great culture, but it also was a culture, loved to have a beer, and I got mixed up in it, so for me, those would be the 3 main things. But at the end of the day, I had a steady career. I would have liked to play a lot more. I think the shoulder injury, that obviously really, derailed me, and it was tough to come back from there. But that'd be it. And that's the main thing I'll pass on to young kids these days as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Nathan. Great advice. And as I said earlier, it's a great teacher of life, cricket. You learn so much from it. Resilience, perseverance, not giving up, keep going. You don't have to be the best. You can still do great things if you're not skillful or talented like certain other players are in teams. And I suppose that's the case in everything in life, but as a sport as well, not just cricket, that you can achieve great things. And thank you for sharing that with us, Nathan, your journey, how it all started. And I'm sure everyone listening and watching would have learned from listening to you explain that journey, how you got into cricket and where did you, end up in the end, playing for Australia and doing all these great things. So thanks for sharing that with us.
No problem, buddy.
Now, hi, everyone. Hope you enjoyed hearing Nathan and I discuss Nathan's cricketing journey.